The mysterious message. It had been 40,000 years since Earth's destruction, but its final echo still echoed across the galaxy. No one expected it, not the mighty empires, not the countless alien species who thought they had albal humanity. Earth was long gone, its ashes scattered across the stars. Yet one message hidden in the deep silence of space remained. The message was simple, chilling, and clear. The message had arrived suddenly, inexplicably. The galaxy's most powerful sensors detected it first. It wasn't a transmission of words or numbers. It was a signal from the past, from a time when humanity was alive and thriving. Before they were erased, the message carried with it a feeling, a strange, cold dread. What did it mean, and why, after all these years, had it come now? The panic spreads. The galaxy's rulers were the first to react. The Varnic Empire, one of the oldest and most feared in the galaxy, was the first to receive the signal. Their Supreme Council, a group of ruthless alien warlords, gathered in silence as they watched the words flash on their screens. Run. They weren't the only ones to receive it, though soon messages flooded the entire galaxy. The Zaraki Coalition, the Algar Federation, the Thyan Dominion, all received the same cryptic warning. At first, they dismissed it as a hoax. Perhaps some rebellious group of humans had managed to escape their fate and was trying to stir trouble. But as more transmissions appeared, began to creep in. The message wasn't a hoax, it was real. It came from Earth, a place long thought destroyed in a cataclysmic war. And what's worse, it didn't just contain words, it carried with it something else, a sense of urgency. A cold, unshakable feeling that something terrible was coming, something so dangerous that even the most powerful empires of the galaxy could not afford to ignore. The ancient device in the heart of the galaxy, hidden on a forgotten world, an ancient device lay dormant. It was a remnant from Earth, created before the destruction, designed to send a warning across the stars. The device had remained hidden for millennia, just waiting for the right moment to send its message. But no one knew about it. Until now, the survivors of Earth had created it, knowing that one day they would be gone. But their message would remain. The survivors had lived in the shadows, scattered across the galaxy, keeping their existence a secret. They knew that humanity's time was over, but they also knew something far worse was coming, something that would threaten the galaxy itself. The warning had been passed down through generations of survivors. A sacred duty, the device once thought lost, had now been activated. The message it carried was simple but powerful. It wasn't just a warning. It was a command the galaxy needed to prepare, and fast. But for what? The galaxy's reaction as the message spread, so did the panic. The Varric Empire immediately began fortifying its borders, sending out ships to investigate any potential threats. The Zaraki Coalition, known for its cold, calculating nature, moved their fleets into position. They had been a peaceful people for centuries, focused on trade and exploration. But now they found themselves in the midst of an intergalactic crisis. No one knew what the warning meant, but they all felt the same fear creeping into their hearts. The galaxy had never known such uncertainty. On distant worlds, alien species that had never encountered humans before felt the weight of the message. And though they did not understand it fully, they could sense the danger. The warning was clear. Something dangerous, something powerful was coming. And it was not from the stars. They had come to know the message wasn't just a plea. It wasn't a simple warning of a nearby threat. It was a message of survival. A command to flee, to leave everything behind and survive whatever was coming. The mystery deepens. As weeks passed, the question remained, what did this warning mean, and why was it coming from a dead planet, from a species long lost? The galaxy's leaders couldn't ignore it. They didn't know whether they were being manipulated, whether this was a trap, or whether it was something far worse than any of them had ever imagined. Some believed that Earth's final warning was an attempt to trick them. They had heard of humans before, violent, unpredictable, and relentless. Perhaps this was some last-ditch effort by the remaining human survivors to take revenge. But most, if not all, feared the truth. This was no ordinary warning. The galaxy had lived in peace for so long. But now, it felt fragile. The Empire's walls didn't seem so strong anymore. The stars didn't shine as brightly. And as the message continued to spread, the feeling of dread only deepened. Something was coming, something far worse than any of them could imagine. But what? The message had one simple word: run. And no one, not even the most powerful forces in the galaxy, could ignore it. The Galactic Council's dilemma. The message was out there, spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. Governments, EMP empires, and coalitions scrambled to comprehend what it meant. Panic had set in. The mysterious warning that had emerged from the dead world of Earth had taken hold of the galaxy's leaders, shaking their confidence to its core. But the true horror had only just begun to unfold. The Galactic Council, a powerful body made up of representatives from all major intergalactic empires, gathered in an emergency session. Their chambers were filled with tension. No one spoke for a long moment as the lights flickered, and the air hummed with energy. All eyes were fixed on the large holo screen, displaying the chilling message: once more run the council members, some old and wise, others young and ambitious, all struggled to keep their composure. What could this mean? Was it a joke, a trick by some rogue faction, or a distant vengeful force? Or was it something far worse? No one knows what this means, said the Zorthian ambassador, his voice grave and uncertain. But Earth's destruction is centuries old. Why now? Why this message? Across the table, the Ryok delegate, a towering figure of ice and stone, nodded slowly. The message may have been dormant for millennia, but it's active now, and we cannot ignore it. The survival of our galaxy depends on understanding its meaning. But while these voices filled the chamber, others were far less willing to listen. The Ithra, the most militaristic species in the galaxy, had their own theory. They had never trusted humanity. They had heard whispers of Earth's downfall, of their stubbornness, their destructive nature. Their arrogance had cost them everything. And now, with a single word, run, they were suddenly supposed to be afraid. The humans were reckless and violent. The Ithra representative snarled, his words sharp. What if this is just a trap, a final ploy to lure us into a false sense of security before they strike at us again? Or what if it's not the humans we need to fear? Retorted the Saurians, their spindly limbs shaking with unease. What if this message was sent by someone else, someone far more powerful, someone who can make entire civilizations tremble at their feet? Room grew silent. The Saurin's words hung in the air like a shadow, casting doubt into the hearts of every council member. If the warning was not from the humans, then who was it from? And what did they want? What could be so terrifying that it made the very name of Earth echo throughout the galaxy after all this time? The first investigation, as the debate raged on one question, still lingered. What was this force that had sent the message? It didn't take long for a response. Months to come, the first probe launched to investigate the source of the signal had returned with unexpected results. It was a deep space exploration vessel, a scout ship, designed to observe distant and often uncharted regions of space. It had been dispatched by the Galactic Council to pinpoint the location of Earth's remains, if of course there were any remains at all. But what they found was something far more disturbing. The probe had detected something massive, something alive. Life floating within the debris of the dead Earth. The ancient relics of humanity, long believed to be lifeless, seemed to hold something more, something unnatural, even monstrous. The probe's sensors had recorded strange, disturbing fluctuations in energy, unexplainable spikes in the atmosphere surrounding Earth's ruined something. Was there something dormant yet powerful? The footage from the probe was shared with the Galactic Council. It showed a huge mass, something organic, ancient, terrifying, surrounding the remains of Earth. It wasn't a simple graveyard of destroyed ships or space stations. It was something alive. The signal run was clearly being broadcast from somewhere in this mass. The galaxy's most advanced scientists were baffled. How could something alive remain hidden for so long, and why? Now, what was the purpose of the warning? Who or what had sent it? Fear spreads among the galaxy's rulers. As more details surfaced, fear began to spread faster than the message itself. The galaxy's rulers were no longer debating whether the message was a hoax or a trap. They had seen the evidence. The ancient device had been activated, and it had sent out a single chilling command: run the Ithra. Once skeptical, began to prepare their forces. Their fleets, once stationed at the edges of their empire, were now moving toward the unknown source. The Zaraki coalition also began shifting its defenses, its fleets on high alert. They had known peace for far too long now. It seemed that peace was about to be shattered. But the Varnic Empire, known for its ruthlessness and military might, was perhaps the most unnerved for them. The warning was too real, too close. Their empire had spent centuries crushing every possible threat. They had never feared anything. But now, in the face of this unknown menace, they could not ignore the one thing that had always been their guiding principle: survival. This is not a drill, the VNAC leader declared, his voice hard as stone. This is a warning, and we will prepare for the worst. The unknown entity. As the debate continued across the galaxy, One thing became abundantly clear: whatever force had sent the message was something unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. The run warning wasn't about fleeing from a single enemy. It was a warning of something bigger, something that could obliterate entire systems. Without effort, the remaining humans, the few who had survived the apocalypse, knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't. Humanity had seen such forces before, they had fought them before, and their message run. It was a command to flee not from a single enemy, but from an entire wave of destruction that had once crushed their own world. The secrets of Earth's last survivors. The entire galaxy was now on edge, and the Council's decision-making had become more urgent. The probe's findings had revealed something far more sinister than they had anticipated. It wasn't just the remnants of Earth that were alarming, it was what they had found surrounding those remains. Something had been dormant for thousands of years, but was now waking up, sending out the simple, yet terrifying message. Run. The question echoed across the stars. What was Earth's last secret? The remaining humans scattered across the galaxy had been in hiding for centuries. Few knew of their existence, and fewer still had ever dared to ask what had truly happened to their home world. Earth had been destroyed, but the survivors had vanished into the shadows of the galaxy, leaving behind only echoes of their once glorious civilization. The Council, now deeply disturbed, focused their efforts on contacting those few humans. For the first time in centuries, human ships began to appear from the farthest reaches of space. They had been avoiding the limelight, living under assumed names, blending into the vast expanse of the galaxy's underworld. Among the few survivors, one group stood out. The X-Fleet, as they were called, had lived on the edge of the galaxy, isolated, hiding from the rest of the universe. This fleet was small, but their knowledge was unmatched. They held the key to Earth's past, and potentially to the galaxy's future. The Council's emissary commander, Alen of the Ryok Empire, was dispatched to meet with them. After months of negotiation and threats of force, the Exodus fleet finally agreed to an audience. What they revealed was even more disturbing than the message sent from Earth. Humanity was not destroyed by accident. The leader of the Exodus fleet, an old human named Commander David Rios, explained. His voice was deep, carrying the weight of centuries of survival. The Earth was wiped out by a force that comes from beyond the stars, from a place where even the strongest empires dare not venture. The room fell silent, every member of the Council hanging on his every word. The survivors we left behind knew of it, Commander Rios continued, but we couldn't stop it. The warning we sent, that run message, was not a plea for help, it was a warning to the galaxy. What we faced on Earth is coming for you next, the unseen enemy. The Council was in disbelief. Who could possibly have the power to destroy an entire world, an entire civilization, and leave nothing but a husk of what was once vibrant and full of life? And why hadn't they heard of this before? Commander Rios continued, his eyes clouded with the memories of his long journey. We encountered them before our fall, a race known as the Vorian, a species so ancient that even the oldest records of the galaxy's history barely mention them. They exist in the dark corners of the universe, where light has never reached. They are not like anything you have ever fought before. Rio said they are predators in the truest sense. They don't conquer planets or civilizations, they destroy them. They break them down piece by piece and consume them. A murmur rippled through the room as the Council members exchanged nervous glances. The Ethra delegate, who had once scoffed at the humans' warnings, now gripped the edge of his chair. And how do you know this? The Zorthian ambassador asked, his voice wary. What proof do you have? Commander Rio stepped forward, activating a holographic display. Images flickered to life on the screen. They were fragments of data, but they spoke volumes: star charts, ancient text, and images of ships, massive ships, with organic, horrifying designs that seemed to breathe and pulse with life. This is the fleet of the Vorian. This is what we faced. The Vorian do not leave survivors. If we hadn't left Earth when we did, we would have shared the same fate as those who perished. The image of the monstrous ships sent a chill through the room. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A blend of machine and living organism. These ships were alive in a sense, and they fed on the destruction of everything in their path. The decision, now the Council was at a crossroads. The knowledge they had just learned was more horrifying than anything they had ever faced. The threat was real, and it was coming for them. Commander Rios's warning had a simple yet profound consequence. The galaxy needed to prepare. The Vorian did not care about borders, allegiances, or the strength of fleets. They only cared about one thing: consumption. We have to unite, Rios urged, his voice carrying a note of urgency. We have to fight together. Earth fell, because we were divided. But now the Vorian are coming, and if we don't stop them, we will be next. The Council's decision was inevitable. Alliances were forged, fleets were mobilized, and preparation for war began. But even as the galaxy's greatest powers readied themselves, there was a lingering doubt. Was it too late? Were they already too late? Commander Alen, who had once dismissed the human warning, now saw the truth. But could the galaxy rally in time? Could they stop the Vorian? Or were they doomed to repeat the same mistakes that had led to Earth's destruction? The reluctant alliance, as the reality of the Vorian threat settled in, the galaxy's leaders were left with a difficult choice. No single empire or race had the strength to take on an enemy like the Vorian alone. It would take the combined might of every power in the galaxy. No matter how bitter the rivalries or old wounds ran, the Council began to convene. But the atmosphere was tense. Old enemies now had to work together, putting aside centuries of distrust, for the sake of survival. Commander Alen of the Ryok Empire, who had once dismissed humanity's warnings, now found himself at the center of this fragile alliance. The Ithra, a race known for their cold pragmatism and cunning, had long been adversaries of the Ryok Empire, yet their leader Asha was among the first to speak up at the emergency council meeting. "We don't have time for petty grudges," she said, her voice sharp. "And unwiring the Vorian care nothing for our politics. If we don't unite, we will all fall." Despite the urgency in Ash's voice, it was clear that not everyone in the room was so eager to jump into an alliance. The Zorthian, a race known for their powerful psychic abilities, were reluctant. "We've never been part of human affairs," their ambassador Zor said with a heavy tone. "Humans have their own ways, brutal, reckless ways. Can we really trust them to fight with us?" Zor's words hung in the air, and the room grew quiet. Commander Rios, the human representative, stood up slowly. His face was weathered by years of survival, and his eyes reflected the burden of everything that had happened to his people. "We fought alone for a long time," Rio said, his voice somber but firm. "But we never thought we'd have to fight something like this. The Victorians don't care about your differences. They're coming for all of us. And if we don't stand together, we'll all be wiped out one by one." His words had an impact, but it wasn't enough to ease the tension in the room. Trust was a fragile thing, especially when faced with the unknown. With the galaxy's powers truly put aside their differences to defeat an enemy that seemed too terrifying to comprehend. The first strike with the Council's decision made, the next step was to prepare the fleet mustered for the first strike against the Vorian advance. But there was a problem. No one knew where the Vorian were. The creatures had been operating from the dark, uncharted corners of the galaxy, and no one had yet found their main fleet. However, the human survivors had a plan. Commander Rios and his Exodus fleet had tracked the Vorian before, back when Earth had fallen, and they had learned something crucial during their desperate flight. The Vorian always followed a pattern. They came in waves, and their movements were methodical. Rose shared this information with the Council, and after analyzing the data, they pinpointed a possible route the Vorian might take. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. An ambush was set. They would meet the Vorian head-on before they could reach any populated systems. The combined fleet, led by the human ships, readied for battle. The Ithra ships, sleek and silent, flanked the Rick's massive warships, and the Zorthian prepared their psychic weapons, ready to deploy at a moment's notice. For the first time in history, all the major galactic powers were fighting as one. Commander Alen of the Ryok Empire looked out at the fleet assembled before him. His face was stern, his posture rigid. He didn't trust the humans fully, but he knew they had the experience and knowledge necessary to fight an enemy like the Vorian. The ships were ready. The battle would be fought soon, a battle like no other. The ambush site was a desolate asteroid field. Its rocky debris provided natural cover, allowing the fleet to hide and wait for the approaching Vorian ships. The silence in the fleet was palpable, broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional transmission. For hours they waited. Tension ran high, and the crew members aboard each ship fought to keep their nerves steady. The Vorian were known to be unpredictable, and any mistake could cost them dearly. Finally, their patience was rewarded. A massive ship, unlike any they had ever seen, appeared on the outskirts of the asteroid field. It was alive with movement, its hull pulsating like some grotesque beast from a nightmare. Behind it, dozens of smaller ships followed, all of them exuding an aura of death. The Vorian fleet was here. Now Rios barked through the comms, and the fleet sprang into action. Ships powered up their weapons, and launched their attacks, but the Victorians responded in kind. The battle was fierce, with energy blasts flying through space, illuminating the black like a galaxy. Wide fireworks show ships were torn apart in seconds, as the Vorian unleashed their deadly energy weapons. But there was something else. The Vorian were not just attacking the fleet, they were attacking minds. Zorthian ships, normally protected by their psychic shields, began to flicker, their shields wavering as the Victorians began to assault them telepathically. It was a new kind of war, one that none of them had prepared for. The unseen cost in the chaos of battle. Commander Elen's ship was struck, and the ROK fleet began to lose ground. The combined forces of the galaxy were struggling against the relentless Factoran. But it was Commander Rios who had the next plan. Human forces, follow me. Rios commanded his ship, faster and more agile than the others, broke away from the formation, charged straight into the heart of the Vorian fleet. As the battle raged on, the remaining human ships launched their final assault, targeting the Vorian flagship. It was a desperate move, but it was their only shot at turning the tide. The shattering truth, the battle raged on for hours. But despite the galaxy's combined forces, the Vorians seemed unstoppable. Their ships tore through the joint fleet with ease, as if they were destined to win. The alien forces of the galaxy had underestimated the true strength of their enemies, and now they were paying the price. Ships were lost at an alarming rate, and with every passing moment hope seemed to dwindle further. Commander Rios had led the charge, pushing his fleet forward in a last-ditch effort to break the Vorian hold. But the Vorian flagship, its dark, pulsating form looming like a nightmare, had proven far more powerful than any of them could have anticipated. The human ships, smaller and faster, could dart in and out of the Vorian defenses, but they couldn't stand up to the sheer firepower and telepathic assaults being unleashed upon them inside the command center of the flight ship. The Vorian were anything but merciful. Their warlord, known as KTH, stood before a vast array of screens monitoring the battle. His face, a mass of scars and cybernetic enhancements, was devoid of emotion, but his mind was focused, fused on the one thing that mattered: victory. We will annihilate them, KTH growled in his guttural voice. The galaxy will belong to us. But despite his confidence, there was something the Victorians hadn't counted on: the resilience of the human spirit. The turning point it was, at this darkest hour, that something unexpected happened. The human ships, though battered, had not surrendered. They regrouped, bringing together the remnants of their forces for one last push. Rios, now gravely injured, stood in the heart of the command room, overlooking the battle. His hands trembled as he watched the destruction unfold. But his mind was clear. We can't win this by force alone, he muttered to himself. We need to outthink them. Rao's plan was a risky one. The Vorian relied heavily on their telepathic abilities, and the more they attacked, the more their minds focused on their enemies. If they could break the connection between the Vorian and their ships, disrupt their psychic link, it might be the key to turning the tide. But it would require a drastic move, one that would cost them dearly. The human commander called for an emergency transmission to the remaining ships. Prepare for a counterattack. This is our only chance. We must target their psychic conduits. As the human fleet began to shift its tactics, focusing on the psychic networks used by the Vorian to control their ships, a small group of human fighters made their way towards the Vorian flagship. The odds were against them, but they were determined to make a difference. Rios' ship, now the last remaining human vessel standing, made a final run at the Vorian flagship, dodging enemy fire and slipping through the defensive barriers. It was a suicide mission, but they had no other choice. The entire fate of the galaxy depended on this one moment. The hidden weapon, meanwhile, aboard the flagship, KF, stood still, his mind fixated on the human forces making their desperate charge. He could sense their fear, determination. It intrigued him, but he also felt something else, an unfamiliar weakness that seemed to ripple through the Vorian fleet. What is this? KTH muttered as his telepathic powers reached up to command his ships. This is not possible. Why are they fighting so hard? The answer came just moments later, as the human ships began to launch a new wave of attacks, not on the Vorian themselves, but on the psychic communication systems. The Vorian telepathic link was their greatest strength, but it was also their greatest vulnerability. The humans had discovered a way to sever that connection, breaking the psychic chains that bound them to their fleet. As the psychic systems flickered and malfunctioned, chaos erupted across the Vorian fleet. The once coordinated attacks turned erratic Vorian ships drifted aimlessly through space, their commanders unable to issue commands. As the telepathic links faltered in that moment, the humans knew what had to be done. Rios gave the order to focus all remaining firepower on the flagship. The final assault had begun, the final push, with everything riding on this last defensive. The human fighters pushed forward, launching wave after wave of concentrated energy blasts at the Vorian flagship. The once imposing ship, now destabilized from the psychic disruption, faltered, its shields flickered, and its weapons fire became erratic. Commander Rios, despite his injuries, gave the command for one final coordinated strike. The human fighters swooped in, taking advantage of the flagship's vulnerability. With a massive explosion, the flagship's central core was struck, causing a chain reaction that sent shock waves through the entire Vorian fleet. The galaxy's last hope was hanging on a thread, and the final outcome was uncertain. But for the first time since the Victorians had arrived, the humans had broken through the aftermath, and a new hope. The galaxy had been shaken to its core. The Vorian, once seen as an unstoppable force, were now reeling from the damage inflicted by the human fleet. Commander Rios's daring plan had worked, at least for now. The psychic disruption had fractured the Vorian command, causing their ships to lose coordination. But while the humans had managed to land a decisive blow, the fight was far from over. As the smoke cleared in space, the remnants of the Vorian fleet began to retreat, but they were not defeated. They were regrouping, pulling back to their command center, plotting their next move. And yet, in the face of the destruction, there was an undeniable shift, a change that had started to spread throughout the galaxy. For the first time, there was a glimmer of hope, the cost of victory, inside the human fleet's flagship. The mood was a mixture of relief and sorrow. Commander Rio stood by the observation window, staring out at the scattered wreckage of the battle. His face was marked with exhaustion, blood staining his uniform. Many lives had been lost, and the toll of the war weighed heavily on him. He had led the charge, but at what cost? We've bought time. But how much? Rios murmured, his voice heavy with the burden of command. His second in command, Captain Aloris, approached him, her face grim. We've saved the galaxy today, sir, but there's still much to be done. The Victorians will regroup, and the war, it isn't over. Rios nodded, his eyes distant. He knew the fight wasn't over. The Vorian were powerful, relentless, and cunning. But there was something else that kept him going. The message they had sent out, a single word that had echoed across the galaxy run. It was a message that had been sent by humanity to every corner of the galaxy, a warning. But now Rios wondered if it was also a call to arms. The galaxy had heard the message, and it had taken action. The people who had once been on the brink of despair were now standing tall, ready to fight back. The message spreads. The message had started as a whisper, but it soon spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The different species that had been cowering in fear now found themselves rallying behind one common cause. From the distant corners of the galaxy, fleets of ships, many once considered too weak to pose a threat, now stood united against the Vorian. The message had struck a chord with the inhabitants of the galaxy. One by one, the species that had once been divided by their differences were now setting aside old grievances, joining forces with the humans to face a common enemy. The small planets, the forgotten colonies, and the alien races who had once been too afraid to act were now coming together, answering the call. We were wrong to doubt humanity, said an elder of the Yashi, a peaceful race that had once believed in avoiding conflict at all costs. We believed we were too weak to fight, but now we will stand by the humans together. We can overcome this darkness. And so the galaxy began to change. The once scattered and divided forces had begun to coalesce, forming the united front that was stronger than anything the Vorian had anticipated. A new ally appears as the war raged on. An unexpected ally arrived, one that had been watching from the shadows, the ancient race of the aliens, a mysterious and highly advanced species that had long since retreated from galactic affairs, decided to reveal themselves. The aliens had never been involved in galactic conflict, preferring to remain hidden in their secluded systems. But when they saw the awe of the humans, when they saw how one species had stood against all odds, they could no longer remain silent. The Elysians, known for their immense technological prowess, decided to join the fight against the Vorian. Their arrival marked a turning point. With their advanced technology and deep knowledge of the universe's mysteries, the aliens began to supply the united fleet with weapons, intelligence, and strategies that turned the tide in ways no one had anticipated. The aliens' leader, an enigmatic figure Known only as Allure addressed the galaxy's new alliance, we were wrong to watch from the sidelines. The humans have shown us what it means to fight for something greater than ourselves. We stand with you now not just as allies, but as friends together. We will finish this war, the Vorian retaliation. But the Vorian, though wounded, were not foolish. They recognized the growing strength of the alliance, and knew that their time was running out. Their fleet was battered, but their resolve was unbroken. The Vorian gathered their forces, pulling in every ship, every resource, and every soldier they could muster. Kath, the Vorian warlord, was enraged, but determined he would not let the humans and their newfound allies take away what he had spent so long building. The Vorian sent a direct challenge to the united fleet, a battle for the fate of the galaxy. KTH knew that this final confrontation would decide everything. The humans, now joined by the aliens and other races, were strong, but the Vorian were relentless. It was clear to all that the final battle was approaching, the last stand for the galaxy. The final battle, a galaxy's fate decided. The time had come. After months of preparing, gathering forces and strategizing, the final battle to decide the fate of the galaxy was upon them. The air and the command centers across the united fleet was tense with anticipation. The soldiers, warriors, and leaders who had once been divided were now ready to face their greatest challenge together. With humans at the helm, they would strike at the heart of the Vorian Empire. Commander Rio stood at the center of the command room aboard the flagship, gazing at the massive hall map projected in front of him. The image showed the approaching Vorian fleet, an imposing wall of ships, each more terrifying than the last. KTH, the Vorian warlord, had finally decided to make his stand. It would be a battle that would shape the future of the galaxy forever. Beside Rio's, Captain Tor is looked out at the image of the fleet as well. They're not holding back, she said, her voice steady, but it was clear that even she felt the weight of what was to come. Come they never do, Rio's replied, his voice filled with determination. But this time, it's different. This time, we fight for the future of the galaxy, for everyone who's believed in us. The room was filled with the emir of officers giving final commands, readying their fleets for the oncoming storm. The alliances forged in the fires of war were now ready to show their strength. The Vorian would soon understand that the galaxy was no longer theirs to control. A moment of reflection. As Rios prepared for battle, his thoughts briefly turned to the message they had sent out all those months ago, the single word that had ignited a spark of hope across the galaxy run. It had been a warning, yes, but it had also been a call to arms, a rallying cry to those who had been cowering in fear, to those who had lost all hope. He thought of the countless species who had now joined the fight, the once feeble Buyashi who had believed themselves too weak to be of any use, now stood beside them ready to fight. The Elysian, with their advanced technology and knowledge, had brought an edge that was unmatched, and the humans, who had been called nothing but carnivores by the Victorians, had proven that their resilience and ingenuity could turn the tide of any battle. The galaxy was no longer helpless, it was united, and that unity would be their strength. The Vectorians strike first. The battle began as the Vorian fleet launched its first wave of attacks. The sound of plasma cannons and missile fire echoed throughout the command room as explosions rocked the space around them. The Vorian were fierce, as they always had been, but now they faced a galaxy that was determined to survive. The first wave of enemy ships came in fast, their weapons blazing. Rio's and Taurus's fleet fired back their advanced weaponry, making a difference against the brute force of the Vorian warships. The Allied fleets coordinated first time launched a barrage of fire, pushing back the Vorian initial assault. But the Vorian were relentless. They regrouped quickly, sending wave after wave, each one more destructive than the last. The battle was becoming a brutal exchange of firepower, with no clear winner emerging. The Vorian fought with every ounce of strength they had left, but the humans and their allies fought with something more. They fought for the future, a turning point in the midst of the chaos. The battle reached a critical point. The Vorian launched their most powerful weapon, a massive energy beam, capable of obliterating entire fleets in a single strike. It was aimed directly at the heart of the united fleet, at Rios' flagship. "We can't stop it," shouted one of the officers, panicked in his voice. But Rios was not afraid. He knew they had one chance, just one, to stop the Vorian final weapon. The aliens, with their vast knowledge of galactic energies, had developed a countermeasure. But it required a precise shot, a delicate timing. If they missed, it would be the end for the fleet. "Get me the Elysian targeting data," Rios ordered, Captain Tor standing at his side. Nodded there on it, Commander. The seconds felt like hours. As the beam drew closer, its destructive force, crackling in the void of space, it was the end, or the beginning of a new era at the last possible moment. A series of coordinated shots from the Alesian ships converged. Energy beam disrupting it just enough to render it useless. The blast scattered harmlessly into space. A massive explosion of light and energy. The Allied fleets had survived but the Vorian had been left stunned. The final push, with the Vorian reeling from the failed weapon. The United Fleet launched a final offensive. All their forces, all their hope was riding on this last push. The human fleet, the aliens, the Yashi, and all the others moved as one, attacking with everything they had. The battle raged for hours, but the Victorians, their power broken, began to falter. Ship that had once seemed invincible now began to fall one by one. Commander, Rios's voice rang out over the comms, his order steady and calm. Push forward, victory is within reach. And with that final rallying cry, the Vorian fleet began to crumble one by one. Their ships fell to the combined might of the galaxy's united forces. The end of the Vorian Empire, finally, after what felt like an eternity. The Vori flagship was in their sights. Kareth, the Vorian warlord, had seen his empire fall apart. His ships lay scattered in the void. His soldiers, defeated, the last remnants of the once feared Vorian fleet, were being hunted down. The end was near. Karth himself faced Rios's one last time, a moment that would decide the future of the galaxy. "It's over, Kth," Rio said, his voice calm, yet filled with finality. "Your empire is done." The Vorian warlord sneered. "You think this is the end?" "We will return." Rios's eyes hardened. "Not this time." With that, the final shot was fired, and the Vorian flagship exploded in a burst of fire and energy. The war was over. The galaxy was free, a new beginning. The galaxy had been saved, but it had been changed forever. The destruction of the Vorian Empire was a victory for the united forces, but it was also the beginning of a new era. The alliances formed during the war would continue to shake the galaxy for centuries to come. Commander, Rio stood at the helm of the flagship, looking out at the peaceful galaxy that now lay before them. There was no more war, no more destruction, only the promise of a new future, one that they would build together as allies. "And as friends, we've done it," Captain Tor said quietly beside him. Rios nodded. "We have. And now the galaxy can rebuild together." The last message humanity had sent out had been a warning, but it had also been a call to action. And in the end, it had been the key to their survival. The galaxy was safe, and the future was bright.